Welcome to the Prolific Pulse Poetry Podcast. However, guess what? We're not going to talk that much about poetry today. We have two wonderful authors here, Warren Ashworth and Susan Kander, and this is their book. It's called We the House, a Novel, and it's pretty darn fascinating. Honestly, I'm not finished with it yet. It's one of these kinds of books that you savor a little bit at a time and you process what you're reading before you move forward. So I find that to be valuable because it's got so much history. Now, Warren is actually an architect and a professor of architecture, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And Susan, you're an accomplished musician, screenplay writer, is that right? Composer. Yeah. And it sounds fascinating. I was reading your biography and it's like y'all have been really profound in your professions. And so then I'm looking at this book going, how did you become writers of this book? So can you give us a little bit of background?
Sure. Happy to. First of all, thank you so much for having us. We're delighted to join you on this Prolific Pulse podcast. The book started, neither one of us are novelists. This is our first book together. It's our first novel, even not together. So it came as something of a gift, I would say. One night, December 31st in 2019, we were gathered with close friends around their dining room table. Fireplace was going. It was New Year's Eve. There was a beautiful old farmhouse, an 18th century farmhouse in upstate New York, and the clients were the hosts were old clients of mine, and she was talking about to the whole crowd at the table, which was about 10 people. She was talking about the process of redoing part of the house and some of the challenges they'd had. And at one point, she turns to the sideboard behind her, above which there's a portrait hanging, and of a early American portrait of a woman. And she just says directly to the portrait, she said, "Well, but you know all this, don't you?" And that 5 days later, I started the book, and I knew that I just loved that moment. I loved the idea that this portrait was sentient and that there were things that the portrait had heard that it retained. So I started the book, and then after about 2 months, I worked with a book group, with a writers group, and I read a couple of chapters to the writers group, and they were very gracious. And one of them said, there are two voices here, because there's the voice of the portrait and there's the voice of the house. In this book, the house and the portrait are the protagonists. They're the ones who speak. And they said, "There's Michael." And they said, the two voices seem rather similar. So I said to myself, well, I live with a person who is brilliant at dialogue, who's written plays, who's written librettos. And I asked Susan to join me in the writing. And that was in late February of that 2020. 3 weeks later, we were
locked in,
and it was a perfect time to spend the next 7 months writing a novel, which we had an enormous amount of fun writing together. There they are. Great.
Yeah, it's if you're going to be stuck at home, why not write a book? I've seen a lot of Well, it seems a lot of poetry written. There are people left and right now publishing their books because of what they've written during the pandemic, and a lot of books on that topic. So, and to be in the house writing about we the house, I could think that there could be some inspirations in that as well. And I'm glad that you all brought this together as a collaboration because you have a composer and you have a composition and you have the architect. It's all, pardon my pun, but it's making beautiful music here in this book.
Oh,
Great. Nice
thank
thought.
you. That's
Yeah,
very nice to hear. It's very
yeah,
nice to hear.
yes, absolutely. So you got good feedback from your writers groups, and glad that again that you brought Susan in on this because it just sounds like it was meant to be for this to be a collaboration. So wonderful. Susan, what can you tell us about your experience with the book?
I can say that first I have as a writer, whether it's with words or music, and I do both. I always had this very small niggling fear at the back of my mind, really ever since I was coming out of college, that one day I might have an urge to write a novel, and that would be a terrible thing because there aren't enough limitations in writing a novel. When you're writing a play or when you're writing a libretto or you're writing an opera or a piece of chamber music, the first thing you do is sort of enumerate or become conscious of all your limitations, which are your best friends
Mm-hmm.
in any creative endeavor. And I always thought of writing a novel as limitless as the English language or any language. And so I was very much afraid that I might one day try and do that, and then I would just be terribly in the soup and never get out. So it was ideal for me because Warren wrote the chapters. This is a book that happens in several dozen chapters. And he would write each chapter himself. It would all come out of his own creativity and his own planning and structuring of the novel, and then hand me the chapter, which automatically limited my field of vision in a fantastic way. I was free to, what we like to say is that Warren wrote the book in black and white and I blew in the color. But I didn't, I was given the skeleton, I was given the structure, I was given the setup, I was given the events of every chapter and the narrative arc of the book. That's all his brainchild. And so my fears of not knowing when to stop went away because I was simply addressing what was in front of me and adding to it and enriching it and having fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved every second of that. It was fantastic. For somebody, I think a lot of creative artists feel like me, it's more fun to rewrite than to write. Once, the hard work of creation it's hard work, but then once you have made your clay and you get to work with it, that's when you get to really go to town and have a lot of fun. And so for me, it was ideal because the clay was made and I just got to get in there and work with it.
Now, who put the voice to the main characters of the picture in the house? The voice that made them come to life.
Well, I think that was mostly Susan's doing. I arranged it so that the two had their voices, and there's a device at the beginning that allows them to communicate, and we make it clear from the first page that the house can not understand the language of humans, but the reason the two protagonists can communicate is because they are both timeless works of art, and that's the device that we set. And once that was done, The house starts out with a very limited vocabulary and has the basics of language, but he learns an immense amount from Mrs. Peale, the portrait, who was herself a Latin teacher when she was alive in Hartford, Connecticut. And she adores language. And so she is not only his interlocutor throughout the book, but she becomes his teacher.
Yeah.
I have to say, the characters were fully conceived. Warren fully conceived the characters. Ambleside is the ingenue. He's very innocent and naive, but has an elegance to him that just is who he is. And Mrs. Peale is a highly educated, rather tart, strong woman who has an affinity for history and people, and is a compulsive teacher. I mean, she just can't help teaching. And so they were completely set up for me, and I just ran with it. One of the things that was most fun for me was the book takes place basically over 200 years. It looks back 50 years, 70 years, and forward 120 or 30 years. And
I think we should point out that the house is built in 1878, and it's an Italianate house in the middle of the Kansas prairie. And so thus it's looking backward to the 1830s because that's Mrs. Peale's time, and it's looking forward to the near present.
All the way to 2010, right? So over time, as Mrs. Peale lives in that house and the generations come and go, and language that we Americans speak changes, she adds words to her vocabulary, and she picks things up from the children and grandchildren and
who live
in the house and come and go. And that was really fun. It was really fun looking up in the dictionary to see, was this word in common use in that year?
The word gadzooks, for instance, first appears in the 1930s. And so it's something we becomes part of her parlance, because she, in the dining room, gets to hear all of the conversations, and she does understand human language. So she gets to hear all the family conversations that happen in the dining room. And the family consists of a man and a woman and their 3 daughters.
And then it goes down the generations.
Yes.
I thought it was fun when she was moved around when we did the wallpapering at the house, and we got to see more of the house through her. I mean, it had me just as curious about the house as Ambleside. It really brought the reader into it. It's like, I want to know, what do you see in this house? I was just as much engaged in it as the house was. So it's just it just really draws you in. And then the part about the husband who had lost an eye and was trying to figure out if this wallpaper and the humor that they kind of threw in with that, it could have been kind of a sad situation, actually had some humor to it. And then the fact that the picture would laugh at Ha, and there's just so much personality in that. And I've really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to getting to know more about what's going on here. So now I see Michael Poage is here, and that's how I met you all. Michael is a wonderful poet, and we've interviewed him, and he's done a class for us before. So welcome, Michael.
And
he's not going to say anything. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, thank you.
This is my wife, Gretchen, here off to
Hi, Gretchen. Nice to
in the
meet
corner.
you.
Gretchen Ike.
Now you are Blue Cedar Press, right, Michael?
We are,
You
yeah.
are.
And
You
then we have
both are.
an editorial board
Okay.
that joins us and helps us
Okay.
in making decisions and yes and no's and what do you think and all that. Yeah. Started
Yeah.
in 2014.
Now, how did you all come in connection? You all and the Ashworth Kanders.
Warren should answer that.
Yes.
No,
Okay, well, Warren, jump in.
we solicited, we sent a portion, we looked at, we thought that a publisher in Kansas, the book is very naturally, since the house is situated in this one spot in Kansas, and the house does not move, even though at times he would like to. We thought, well, let's consider finding a regional publisher. And Blue Cedar Press had wonderful, a strong website and a strong record of publications of some very interesting looking books. And so we sent a submission, and we heard back from Gretchen about a few weeks later. And she requested to see the rest of the manuscript. And that was the beginning of our relationship.
Wonderful.
They have been terrific to work with. I have to say that we hear from many authors that the editing process is fraught. In this case, the editing process was an absolute delight. Gretchen and their Laura Tillum worked together, and they went through this. We all went through the book a number of times and caught every. There were questions of interpretation. There were questions of history, and then there were questions of grammar and syntax. And we had a great time with them. So I think that one terrific advantage of working with a regional publisher and independent press is that you get that kind of concentrated attention. At one point, Gretchen sent us a note in the middle of the night saying she just finished the final read through, and it
Still brought her to tears. He's choked up.
And that was quite lovely. You don't
We
get
really
that,
liked getting that email.
you don't get that from Simon and Schuster, I don't think. So it's very nice.
I understand that. I have a press as well, and
Yeah.
when I work with people and edit, it's one of my favorite things to do. Actually, is working with my authors in the editing process. There's not a poem that doesn't get looked at several times, and tossed and turned and everything. But it's by the time you get done, you end up with a beautiful product.
Mhm.
So it's well worth it. And it tells me something else too. So it sounds like every other author, you all found with your working with your editor that there is no 100% perfect written book. There's
Right.
going to be little quirks and turns that you have to work on. And that's one of the fears that people have. If I don't have it 100% perfect, it's going to get refused. But no, if a book stands to tell the story, those things can be dusted off and fixed. That's where I look at it anyway. And, so I encourage people to, if they have something, just get it out there, get it in the hands of the people. Even if it gets rejected, you learn from your rejections. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And with our press, Lisa, we have two people who will read the incoming prose manuscripts for the most part, and two people who will read incoming poetry manuscripts. And that's the first step in the process. And then we, depending on what the opinion is of each pair of readers, we'll then expand that to the rest of the board. So, we get everybody reading it.
Yeah.
If we have any interest at all in publishing it. So there is actually a process.
Absolutely. This is,
And
yeah.
this process has been incredible. I mean, it's pretty, I mean, Warren and Susan are their own PR department. I mean, it's like, you know, they have good friends, and they have a network of people, and they have the energy to research other directions to go in terms of public relations. And I'm sorry about my voice. I'm recovering from some kind of respiratory stuff. It's not COVID, but
Bronchial pneumonia. is what you have.
I have bronchial pneumonia. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Well,
So-
that'll lay you low.
Yeah, it's yeah. I'm supposed to get some stuff from the doctor today. It's supposed to help,
feel
but
better.
anyway, so the voice is a little different. But it's been really wonderful working with both Warren and Susan, and getting to know them, getting to know you all over the miles, as William Stafford once said. And so I'll leave it at that. I mean, and also, well, I won't leave it at that. Gretchen and Laura have done an exceptional job in editing and in working together, and then working with both you, Warren, and Susan, and you know, so from our standpoint, it's equally as it's been a joyful kind of process.
There's also a brilliance in this the strategy, the whole design of this book. To me is really brilliant, and is I mean, I'm more enthusiastic about it probably than any book. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm very enthusiastic about it, as enthusiastic as I have about any book we published, and have been thinking a lot as I'm a professional historian, thinking about how exciting it would be if we could get, if we could clone off the notion of houses telling their stories all across the United States in different regions and different cultures, you know, and different time periods, and how, you know, I mean, it's just such a rich motherlode concept.
Yes.
So you did such a beautiful job with the two characters. They're so memorable, just amazing.
I'm personally waiting for a book, Warren, on restaurants.
Well, that's another idea, actually.
I don't know if Lisa knows that about you, but go ahead.
You have
Most
me
of my
curious now. What's that all about?
Most of my professional career is spent designing restaurants and hotels, so it is something I have am quite familiar with. And I just left my studio class this morning, where I continue to teach people to design restaurants and offices, etc. So I adore the teaching now as much as I enjoy the design work. But I think part of being an architect is one gathers from experiences one has had. Everything goes into design, and to some extent, I think that this book we've written is the same kind of gathering. I'm delighted to be able to gather so much into this little romp we had.
Yeah, I think we haven't mentioned yet that this house, which is named Ambleside, Ambleside is the narrator of the book. Ambleside is a real house. It was built by Warren's great-grandfather, and it stands today at number 1 Ambleside Lane in a town in Kansas, and it's an amazing confluence of actual history, family history, and a passion that Warren happens to have, which is for American wood frame architecture. And that's sort of really at the very beginning of this journey, I think, for Warren, is that he tracked down this house. We didn't even know if it was still standing, and
Wow.
found it. And he got in touch with the owners back in 2007, and we went to visit it. And then it became the centerpiece of one of his lectures. He teaches architectural history, and it became the centerpiece of one of his lectures. And then when we had this experience on New Year's Eve 3 years ago, that was the lightning in the bottle.
Mhm.
And the house, it was the natural house for this to happen in, which is the house that my grandmother grew up in, and which I had heard about from my mother, though my mother had in fact never seen the house, as the family had moved west. But it's a very special house that has been lovingly restored by a wonderful couple since 1994, and they are still working on it. As anyone who is involved in the preservation of old houses knows, it does not end. And they have been just wonderful about it. Michael and Gretchen have seen the house, and it, as they say, it stands and looks great these days. So it's kind of wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's very personal.
Mhm.
Through Warren, I have learned to love houses and think about them very personally, the way that he does. But this is intensely personal,
Mhm.
because it was built by somebody in his family, and he knows how it was built. I mean, he's built houses. We both built houses, and so in that respect, it's very, very personal, and we feel like we have a relationship with this house. And so I think that was at the very beginning what Warren was doing. He was wanting to write his relationship to a wood framed American house.
Mhm. I anticipate that there'll be some book signings going on around that area at some point.
Yeah.
For the
Yes,
house.
there will in January. There will. Lisa, if you don't mind, I think it's an appropriate time to read the epigram, which is a short epigram
Absolutely.
written by Mark Twain, and it really has everything to do with my inspiration for this book. So it is this is Mark Twain wrote this about a house that was designed for him in the 19th century when he was finally, successful and had done well enough for himself that he could commission an architect to design him a house. And the house that architect designed is really a very special house, and it's a public museum now in Hartford. It's where he and his wife lived with their 3 daughters for many, many years. The epigram is as follows. To us, our house was not insentient matter. It had a heart and a soul and eyes to see us with, and approvals and solicitudes and deep sympathies. It was of us, and we were in peace, in the peace of its benediction. We never came home from an absence that its face did not light up and speak out its eloquent welcome, and we could not enter it unmoved.
Mm.
Mark Twain, letter to Joseph Twitchell, 1896.
Wow.
That's the idea that a house can have a soul
Yes.
is, I think, something that I feel that we in the United States have a special relationship with our houses. Those of us who are lucky enough to either grow up in or live in a house of some quality, of some thought, a house of some art. These American houses are distinct from their European antecedents. They have something built into them, into their frame, that speaks of something greater than wood and nails and plaster. That's my feeling.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree with that. My aunt Alta in Missouri, we used to love to go to her house. It was a big old country home, and they pretty much lived off the land, farm, and the house was just as much a part of the family as the family was a part of the house. And you to kind of be around that, experience that. I think sometimes, me growing up in a military family where you went from house to house every 3 years, but you bring life into the house that you're in, and you do develop a relationship with where you live, even if it is for a short period of time.
Mhm.
So all people can have that in some sense or other.
Mhm.
When I look back, I remember how this certain house that we lived in was a certain way, and certain characteristics of it, and certain things I missed about it,
Mhm.
and when I moved on to a different kind of house because of military moves. So you can even develop that even if you're having to move from place to place. So
Mhm.
it's really, really vital. There's a show that I'm addicted to, and I usually watch on Saturdays, called Hometown, which y'all might be familiar with that. It's where people go in, they live in this old town, and I think it's Alabama, Louisiana, somewhere in that area. And they go around and they renovate old houses that have been sitting there. And they take a portion of the house, they try to keep alive as much of the house as they can. And if something has to go out of the house, they figure out a way how to bring it back in. Like if a piece of furniture has to come out, they'll turn that furniture into a chair, or and something like that, so they still bring the life back into the house. And that comes to mind, as we're talking about this, is that even if there's a change, there's still a way to bring that history back in and to keep that alive within the home. So
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I wish you
uh,
could. I wish you could read, or maybe you already have, the opening and with the two voices. Is that possible? Do you have time for a little of reading of the just to give the nature of
I
the
have time
prose?
if you all have one to do that.
We would be
Yeah.
happy to. We'd be happy to do that. There's we would the jumping into part of the first chapter. You want to set it up briefly?
Yeah, we're gonna cut in to the first chapter, and get the moment where the house and Mrs. Peale, the portrait, make contact. So the house is an 1878 brand new house presiding over a vast and empty prairie. And Mrs. Peale is a woman in an early American portrait hanging in the dining room wall. This is Ambleside is telling us this story from the vantage point of 2010, but he's going back to the origin of their relationship.
And the painting, just to further illuminate a little, is that the painting has been shipped at the request of the house, the people who live in the house. They're out in the middle of the Kansas prairie and there's no art to be had anywhere. And they've sent a letter back east saying, please send some art. It's artless out here and we need something for our walls. And so a crate arrives at the railroad station some weeks later, and it contains the portrait of Mrs. Peale. Finally, one evening, about 6 months after she'd been hung up on the dining room wall, we became distinctly aware of a voice that could only be described as exasperated, practically a bellow.
Oh, for pity's sake, you ignorant people. It's not Spiel, it's Peale, Mrs. S. Peale. and we are in no way related.
You speak? We inquired, quite surprised.
Who said that?
She snapped. We did. We are Ambleside.
What do you mean, we are Ambleside?
We are Ambleside. We are the house.
And you speak?
She asked in an astonished tone. Only to other works of art, made with affection and skill. Are you a work of art?
Oh, my heavens, yes. Yes, I am a portrait. And I thought I would be all alone on this wall forever with these people who are not my people.
A pause ensued.
Can you see me?
She asked us. We only see that which is without. We see nothing within. Can you see within?
Yes, I see quite clearly, almost the whole dining room. Can you hear them at the table? Oh, how they do talk.
We hear, but we cannot understand the language of men. Their sounds are too temporal. We only hear that which is little affected by time, that which is timeless.
Then you do not hear what these impossible people call me.
No, what are you called?
Mrs. Simon Peale is my correct appellation, but they think I am Mrs. Spiel. Some old biddy with a shaky hand wrote my name in a letter accompanying me, and it was so illegible that Mrs. S. Peale, that is myself, was read as Mrs. Spiel.
That must be most vexing.
Yes, it most certainly is. Galling, and 'twill never be corrected. That is the meeting of
Right.
Ambleside and Mrs. Peale.
That was wonderful. I was picturing a play as you were doing that. That would be what, maybe that would be the next step with
It
this.
would make a, it would
It
make
would be
it,
fun.
It
it's an
would,
easy setup for a play. There's no question about it.
absolutely. Oh my goodness. As the wild imagination that I have, I've already had the dishes running away with the spoons. So yeah, this definitely has a lot of life and flavor to it. You know, I really have enjoyed this today. I do want to ask, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to bring up? Because I may not have asked the question. Y'all just so wonderful sharing about this.
It would be fun that we could read you one last portion, which is a critical chapter, and we'll read a portion of it, but it's the crux of the book, and it's sort of the major conflict in the book,
Okay.
and it has a kind of a fun rhythm to it. Shall we do that?
Let's do it.
Are you up
Your
for a
time.
little more?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
It's very good.
Okay, what page is it?
This is Tempest, and it is page 73.
Okay.
This chapter is chapter 14. It's called Tempest, and it takes place in November of 1888.
Perfidy! Liar, imposter, liar, perfidious liar, imposter, liar.
Mrs. Peale, Mrs. Peale.
Don't talk to me, you appalling stack of faggots, imposter.
Mrs. Peale.
You have nothing to say, nothing.
Nothing about what?
All these years, all this time, all these years I've hung in this house, you perfidious, mendacious hovel, liar.
We pressed forward through our alarm. Mrs. Peale, what vexes you so?
You said nothing.
She shouted. About what?
Never once.
What has unleashed
I
this?
am hung here, helpless, in abject ignorance of your true self all these years.
We have never known such fury, we cried out. You frighten us. What blight has struck between last evening and this one?
Dishonoring the memory of Mr. Peale, my Simon. All these years you knew, and you said nothing, nothing.
We spoke in soothing tones, hoping to calm her wrath. How, pray tell us, how ever have we done such a thing? We are incapable of an untruth. What have we said? How have we done such a thing? One last blistering
You.
followed by a disturbingly long silence. Finally came
Ambleside. I have spent the last 9 years on your perfidious wall, and I have just learned things I never dreamt to hear. You call yourself a house?
That's it.
Oh,
I
goodness.
leave you there.
Well, now I'm going to have to read a little faster to get to that point, 'cause that's fascinating. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. You might just motivate me to have some more novelists come on the show.
Yeah.
Great. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank
And-
you.
Yeah,
Michael,
Lisa,
it's-
thank you for making an exception from the line of poets that you bring in and interview and support us. It's wonderful. So thank you. And thank you for making an exception here for We the House.
Well, it sounds to me like We the House kind of puts poetry in motion anyway. So I think it's an appropriate.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all
Michael,
so
filter.
much. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
too.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.